Stop convincing yourself that you were born with a bad memory. The truth is much more empowering. You don't possess a weak brain, you possess an untrained one. We've all experienced it, standing in a room wondering why we entered, or reading a page only to realize we didn't register a single word. This happens because we haven't mastered the transition from our temporary mental workspace to our permanent storage. Let's begin with step 1. Understand how memory works and the real reason you forget everything. Think of your short-term memory as a digital clipboard. It's designed to hold snippets of information for just a few seconds before it's overwritten. On the contrary, your long-term memory is like a massive, indestructible hard drive. Once data is correctly encoded there, it stays for a lifetime. Most of what we forget was never actually saved, because we didn't click the save button. For instance, when you meet someone and hear their name, your brain treats it like a temporary browser tab. If you don't move that data to a permanent bookmark, it disappears the moment you close the window. If you're ready to stop this mental leaky bucket and boost your English fluency at the same time, make sure to subscribe to our channel right now. We provide the strategies to grow your vocabulary and your mind naturally. Stay with me until the end of this video, because we're about to build a system you can finally trust. Think of your eyes not as simple windows, but as a high-powered spotlight in a pitch-black warehouse. This brings us to a fundamental truth in step 2. Pay full attention, because you can't remember what you never noticed. We frequently blame our poor memory for forgotten details, but in reality, we are often suffering from a chronic lack of focus. I've observed that our brains are incredibly efficient at filtering out the background noise of daily life to prevent us from being overwhelmed. If we don't consciously tell our minds that a specific detail is valuable, the brain treats that data as garbage and discards it before it ever reaches storage. Let's consider a new scenario. Imagine you are at a neighbor's and they point out a specific rare plant they've been growing. You nod and smile, but your mind is already drifting toward what you will cook for dinner. When you try to recall the plant's name later, your mind is a total blank. You didn't actually forget it. The file was never even created because you were mentally miles away during the conversation. We must realize that being physically present is simply not enough. I've found that by stopping for just 5 seconds to truly observe the colors and repeat the name, we signal to our brain that this moment matters. Unless you choose to intentionally open the gate of awareness first, your memory remains a locked room that no information can enter. Before we dive into the next technique, I have a quick question for you. When you think of the word ocean, do you see the letters O-C-E-A-N in your head? Or do you see crashing blue waves? Share what you see first in the comments below. This brings us to a game-changing realization in step 3. Turn words into pictures, because your brain thinks in images, not text. I've discovered that our minds are essentially advanced movie projectors, not text-heavy spreadsheets. Words on their own are abstract and easily forgotten, but a vivid image, especially one that is strange or funny, is like mental superglue. To master this, you must translate every piece of information into a visual scene. For instance, if you meet a new colleague named Forrest, don't just repeat the name. Instead, imagine a literal thicket of trees growing out of his briefcase as he walks. Or, if you're trying to remember the English word gigantic, Don't just memorize the definition. Visualize a massive, neon pink squirrel the size of a skyscraper stepping over city buildings. We need to embrace the weird, because the more exaggerated your mental picture is, the more your brain wants to keep it. I've found that when we stop acting like robots and start behaving like artists, the struggle to memorize simply disappears. By populating your mind with these colorful, living snapshots, you ensure that every new piece of knowledge remains etched in your consciousness forever. Our brains were never designed to be dry filing cabinets for boring data. They were built to be the stage for epic adventures. This leads us to the incredibly powerful step 4. Use the story method, because your brain is wired for narrative, not lists. I've realized that most people fail at memorizing because they treat information like a pile of disconnected bricks. However, our minds naturally crave movement, characters, and high-stakes drama. By weaving random facts into a cohesive narrative, you create a mental movie that is nearly impossible to delete from your long-term storage. Let's try a completely new example. Suppose you need to remember 5 random items: a key, an umbrella, a banana, a guitar, and sunglasses. Instead of repeating them like a robot, imagine a golden key that unlocks a massive, polka dot umbrella in the middle of a desert. Suddenly, a giant banana jumps out and starts rocking out on an electric guitar while wearing cool, neon sunglasses. It's ridiculous, right? But because it's a story filled with action and surprise, your brain locks it in immediately. I've seen many people transform their learning by simply becoming the directors of their own mental films. Once you stop forcing your brain to memorize and start allowing it to fantasize, the world of information becomes your personal playground. It's a heartbreaking reality that most of the studying we do is actually just a temporary illusion of knowledge. This leads us to the most scientifically proven method in our journey. Step 5. Practice spaced repetition. Because on-time learning is fake learning. I've seen so many learners burn the midnight oil, believing that intensity equals retention, but our brains simply aren't built to absorb everything in a single, frantic burst. Without a strategic plan to combat the natural, forgetting curve, your hard-earned knowledge evaporates like mist in the morning sun. Think of memory like building a sturdy brick wall. If you pile up all the bricks and wet mortar at once, the structure collapses under its own weight. However, if you lay a few rows, let the cement dry, and then return to add more, you create something that lasts for centuries. To achieve this, we must revisit our data at specific intervals. 1 hour after learning, then 1 day, 4 days, and eventually 2 weeks later. Let's use a new example. Suppose you learn the English word peculiar. You feel smart today, but without repetition, that neural path will vanish. By reviewing it tonight and again in 3 days, you are curing the memory. I want to hear from you. What is the one subject you spent hours on, only to forget everything right when you needed it? Share your frustration in the comments below. This simple shift in timing transforms you from a stressed-out crammer into a confident master of your own mental archive. We often treat our minds like calculators, but the truth is they function much more like a beating heart. This brings us to a secret that will change your learning forever. Step 6. Use emotional connection. Because feelings make memory permanent. I've discovered that facts are just ghosts until they are clothed in emotion. When you feel something, whether it's joy, fear, or wonder, your brain triggers the amygdala, sending a clear command. This matters. Save it forever. Let's use a new example. Imagine learning the English word devastated. Instead of a boring definition, recall the sting of a personal failure, or the loss of something dear. That heavy feeling in your chest becomes the mental ink that makes the word permanent. Or, consider a historical milestone like the first moon landing. Don't just see the date. Feel the collective awe of humanity watching that small step. I want us to stop being robots and start being human in our studies. If you can't find a reason to care about what you're learning, your brain will treat it as trash and delete it before sunrise. The most effective way to truly own a piece of knowledge isn't to hide it away, but to give it away as fast as possible. This brings us to a strategy that transforms you from a quiet observer into a confident expert. Step 7. Teach what you learn, because teaching is remembering twice. I've realized that when we act only as a student, our brain stays in a passive receiving state. But the moment we prepare to explain a concept to another person, we activate a much higher level of cognitive processing. We are forced to organize disorganized thoughts, simplify complex ideas, and use our own words to bridge the gap. Let's try a fresh example. Suppose you just learned a new English adjective like breathtaking. Instead of just nodding at the definition in your notebook, find a friend, or even speak to your own reflection in the mirror. Explain it like this. I learned today that a breathtaking view is one that literally makes you gasp, because it's so beautiful, like looking down from a mountain peak. By doing this, you aren't just repeating sounds, you are rebuilding the idea from the inside out, which carves it into your mind like stone. For those of you specifically looking to master new terminology, we have an incredible deep dive video on this channel called How to Remember English Words Forever that you should check out to get even faster results. We must remember that teaching isn't about having a professional degree, it's about having the courage to share what we know. When you become the source of information, you stop being someone who struggles to remember and start being someone who simply knows. Our ancestors didn't have notebooks or smartphones, yet they could recall vast amounts of information by simply walking through a mental doorway. This brings us to the legendary Step 8. Create a mind palace. I found that while we often forget abstract facts, our brains are exceptionally good at remembering physical layouts and locations. By anchoring new data to specific spots in a place you know by heart, you transform your memory into a searchable, permanent library. Let's build a quick one together. Imagine your front door is guarded by a massive golden clock that chimes every time you blink. In your hallway, you trip over a heavy suitcase that is actually snoring like a person. Moving into the kitchen, your toaster is shooting out slices of glowing blue bread. Finally, in your bedroom, a giant flashlight is projecting a spinning galaxy onto the ceiling. Because we've placed these strange images in familiar rooms, you can walk through your home anytime to retrieve them. I encourage you to start building your own mental temple today. By mastering this spatial architecture, you ensure that no important detail ever wanders off into the void again. While you are drifting off to dreamland, your brain is actually starting its most important shift of the day. This leads us to a secret weapon for long-term retention. Step 9. Review before sleep. because night is when your brain decides what to keep. Many of us believe that our minds simply shut down at night, but in reality, your brain acts like a meticulous editor, sorting through the thousands of scenes from your day to decide what stays and what gets deleted. I've realized that the final 10 minutes before you close your eyes are the most valuable real estate in your mind. If you spend that time scrolling through mindless news feeds or short videos, you are accidentally telling your brain that those random distractions are worth saving forever. Instead, I want us to try a different ritual. Imagine taking just 5 minutes to quietly revisit 3 powerful English idioms you encountered that afternoon. For instance, if you learned the phrase "break the ice," visualize yourself using it successfully in a conversation, just as you feel yourself falling asleep. By doing this, you are sending a priority signal to your internal filing system. We aren't adding extra work to our busy schedules. We are simply optimizing a natural biological process to work in our favor. By intentionally selecting your final thoughts, you ensure that your mind continues to build your genius, even while you rest. Think of your brain not as a storage bin that is already full, but as a high-performance engine that requires clean fuel and regular maintenance to run at peak speed. This brings us to our final level of mastery, Step 10. Use active recall and protect your mind from overload. I have found that most learners fall into the trap of passive familiarity, where they reread notes and think they know the material. But this is a dangerous illusion. Real memory is forged when you close your book and force your mind to rebuild the information from scratch. For example, instead of looking at your English vocabulary list again, try to explain the meaning of a new word to an imaginary student while you're walking. This struggle to retrieve data is exactly what carves it into your long-term storage. However, even the best techniques fail if your mental garden is choked with weeds. We must be ruthless with the digital noise we allow into our lives. If we flood our senses with hours of mindless scrolling, we leave no room for the knowledge that actually improves our future. The persistent weight of staying stagnant while others move forward is a burden you don't have to carry anymore. To break this cycle and achieve the English fluency you deserve, you must subscribe to our channel right now. By reclaiming your mental space and challenging your brain to retrieve what it knows, you finally stop being a passenger in your own mind and start becoming the master of your destiny.